Back to our priority, I'm going to start by the creation of vendors. So everything is here under the purchasing, vendors, and then vendors. And over here, entering a form of priority, and I'm going to go over the main steps to create a vendor. I'm going to change the display on the top right so we can look at just one record right now. And in order to create a vendor, all you need to do is to create a vendor name. So you can control the number, but if not, the priority will assign a number for you. So I'm going to call it just new vendor, okay, and dash webinar that we are creating right now. As soon as I click enter, you will see that the number was assigned. You can override the number if you want to handle it in a different way. Status will be active later on. As you progress, you can block payments, inactivate a vendor, and many more. A reminder, F1 on any field here will give you extra help to read and so on. And let's go over some of the main items on the top level here. Street address, city, state, phone numbers, etc. That's the main vendor items. Moving over to some other items, and I'm just going to concentrate on the main items here because there are some more information here, but none of that is a mandatory. Shipment, I don't think it's a mandatory as well. You probably want to look at the payment terms. Make sure that you set the payment terms for this vendor, so automatically it will inherit those payment terms. Set the main currency that will influence the chart of account, because as soon as we leave this form, a chart of account for that vendor will be open as well based on that currency. And I want to say that those are the main items to set for a vendor. There are probably some more, and you might look for 1099 or any other. Look at the top right at the actions over here and look at the financial parameters for vendor. You will find some more financial parameters. So as soon as I'm standing here on this vendor number, any vendor, and I'm going to click the financial parameter for vendor, you'll see here that now the system already creating this vendor that ends with the number 50 in my chart of account and takes me to the next form that called the financial parameter for vendor with the same vendor information. Here you will find more financial relevant information, federal tax ID. Again, the payment terms is again here, you can fill it here. 1099 categories and other information. And again, a reminder, F1 will provide you help on any field here. So those are two main forms to work with a vendor, the vendor form and the financial parameters for a vendor. If you look down at the sub level, you see more the vendor bank account information, and some other information. I'm going to use escape to go back to our main form and vendors. Let's talk about the sub levels here. So I'm going to concentrate again on the most popular one, but you can explore yourself later on some others. Vendor contact. So this vendor might have few people that works at this vendor. So full name, phone number, cell phone, emails, etc. You can fill in the contact here. I would say that this one is an important one, the vendor documents. If you want to upload any agreement or any scan document with this vendor, click on the file path, upload a file here to the cloud or to your server. The parts per vendor, if you want to restrict the amount of items that you are buying from a vendor, so later on when you create a purchase order, instead of see thousands of items, you'll see only several, you can choose them here, not to create them, but to choose them from your part catalog and allow it here. So you will have a shorter list when you're trying to receive items, to purchase items, and so on. Task for vendor is part of the CRM, so you can have different tasks here and so on. We had a session on CRM, so you can look back in one of the webinars. Later on, you'll be able to see the open purchase order for this vendor, the vendor price list that we can discuss, and some other interesting areas here. So that's about creating a vendor in the system. I'm gonna leave this form open and we're gonna move to the next stage. One of the other things that you want to be able to know that you can use in priority will be the demand or the purchase requisition and what we call the purchase demands. Not every size of organization will use purchase demand, but if you want to, you can, because the mechanism is in place here. The purchase demand will allow users to place a demand. So to simplify the process here, I will pull one of the demands that I have in a system just to go over that and show you quickly what is it about. A user can start a document by placing a date, a document number, demand information will auto-populate for you. A user can choose the vendor if he knows which is the vendor he want to buy it from. And there are some other information, which warehouse I want to receive it, and some other, if relevant, who is the user that is demanding that. Not just creating this document, which I know it will be probably somewhere here assigned to, but for who is the user in the organization that wants that items to be bought and so on. And again, you can learn more about that part. Underneath here, there is a sub-level, and then choose the part number you want to buy, or just use 000 as a general part, right? And you can override the description, the quantity that you want to buy. It might be a laptop, some office supply, whatever it may be. The estimated unit price if the user know, and some other item like budget and attachments and whatever it may be. Status, we have the statuses here from draft to authorized. It's just a demand, of course. And there is a mechanism for authorization for demands as well, and you can learn more about that part on the in our expert website that I shared before. Otherwise, just authorize it, and then the buyers can actually look at those demands and move forward from a demand to create some other steps into the purchasing mechanism. If anyone need to print out a demand, look up at the actions here, print the purchase demand, or any other things that the buyer might be able to do from the demand. After looking at things, open a request for price quotes from vendor, or directly open a purchase order. So look at those actions, and then based on the way that your organization works, you can implement them in different ways. So that's purchase demand. For the buyers can look at those purchase demands and purchase requisition that will show all the demands in one nice form. So you can look at those things. And over here, you will see that if I'm pulling everything, there's a lot of little demands that the buyer can look at, make decisions, move it forward, create purchase order, and so on and so forth. That's the purchase requisition that will summarize all the different demands that were created in the system. Right. Side note, we'll talk about it a little later. If you're using advanced mechanism like the MRP, the Material Requirement Planning, that mechanism that will calculate the items you need to buy based on forecast, based on actual sales orders, etc., the results will be also at a purchase demand. So the MRP will create a big purchase demand with a lot of items, which one to buy, what's the quantity, etc. That will also create the purchase demand for you automatically. The next phase might be a request for price quote from a vendor. So you can see here that there is a section called request for price quotation. Not every organization will use it, but if you want to send a very nice request to your vendor, you can do it through here. So again, you saw before you can create it from the demand directly, which was under here, or just manually create a request for a vendor. So I'm going to pull one of the requests and I will show you the main items you want to pay attention here when you create a request for price quotation. The first thing you want to do is to choose the vendor. And then the date will be auto-populate for you. When do you request for that? You're also going to have a unique number for your request. There is the status, of course, and we'll talk about that. You can see here to the right, if it was created automatically from purchase demand, you will see the purchase demand here. Otherwise, you can even call it from here and it will auto-populate the items below. We know also how to type type a sales order to request for price quotation. So we can do it here as well. And you can see here some other items. They are not mandatory, and you can learn more about that by just clicking an F1 and learning some more about the different options over there. The next item here is, of course, to go to the sub-level. Over here, requested item. Which item would I like to get quote for? So you choose your part numbers, of course, and the quantity you would like to buy, the date you need those items, and maybe some other information. Obviously, the quantity was here, and maybe some other information and so on. You can use the shipping address if you want the vendor to calculate how much it's going to cost you, including shipment, or maybe other areas, attachments, some remarks, etc. And from here, you can change the status that usually start as a draft. You can change it to quote or approved, one of the statuses that works for you, and print this RFQ, send it out by email, etc. Today in my webinar, you can see slightly different display on the printing and emailing area. The reason for that is we just moved to version 20 with priority, which will be open and available soon for customers as well. So a little bit different, layout. So you can print it out, display, email it, etc., as a PDF, non-PDF, different layouts that are available, and so on. And let's just display it right now, send it nicely to the vendor, and your vendor will see a printout to say, hey, dear vendor, please give us a quote, send us a quote for that item, that quantity, and so on and so forth. That's request for price quotation. Next, again, if you're using those processes, the vendor might return the price quote with the numbers, right? Or it will send you his own email. If you want to use this mechanism, you might want as well to record those numbers. So for historical reason, you'll see later on what was the quote that you got for an item and so on, and in order also to compare between quotes. So the next section here called vendor price quotation, this is the place where you're going to record the item. So it's not the same form. It's another form that relies on the previous form. So vendor price quotation, that will be the area to record the pricing you got. And over here, again, I'm going to pull some information quickly. You can choose the vendor. You will have a vendor quote and a date and status, of course. And you can see here under the references, if it is based on an RFQ or request for a quote, it will be here, or you can choose it here, and then it will bring over the purchase demand and anything else that it was based on before. The items will be down here at the itemized quotation with the quantity that you requested. And over here, what you want to do is to enter the unit price you got and maybe some other information, attachments, or whatever it may be. When you do that, well, the first thing that obviously will happen later on, it will be easy from here to translate or to move forward to an actual purchase order. But also you will have all the history and data that was created for you, and you can use it, first of all, to see some historical information. Even if you look at a part number later on, at the part catalog or wherever you're showing an item to sales, etc., and you want to look at historical prices and so on. So here I zoomed into a part in the system, and one of the sub-level here, except inventory and bill of materials, etc., called purchase price options per part. You will be able to see here different POs, different requests for request, etc., or price list, and what was the quantity, what was the price. So that's one good reason to record different pricing that you're getting from vendors. So under the part catalog, there is a sub-level where you can see all historical offers and pricing, etc. I'm using escape to go back. That was the the vendor price quotation. You don't need to print it because you don't need to send it, but that's available for you if you want to print out the information. Otherwise, it is in the system, of course. The next stage will be to create purchase order. Well, purchase order, most of you as organization will use either directly without going to the purchase demands and purchase quotes, etc., which you might just use your emails, etc. That's fine. But purchase order is something that most of you will use. So let's look at purchase orders and the different options that we have over there. I'm going to go into the purchase order form. Going to make sure that we have a nice view of information here. So over here, you'll see that I have some data. So I'm going to show you over here how to create a purchase order. Actually, what we'll do, we'll create a new one right here and right now. So in order to create purchase orders, here are the steps. Step number one, choose the vendor. Who do you want to buy it from? So you can, of course, type in something and then locate the vendor you want to buy it from, choose the vendor, click enter, and you'll see the system auto-populate the vendor name and the contact. Probably that contact, which is part of this vendor, was marked over there as a main contact for purchase orders. That's why you see it as a default. Otherwise, you can, of course, replace with other contact that works for PayPros, sound systems, and so on. Automatically, the date will appear and the order number, which is a unique number, and the status right now is draft. You see that the prices are still 0 because I haven't chose any item, but in the references, you can base your purchase order on a purchase demand, on a purchase quote, on a blanket order that we have. That mechanism is available, and you can learn more under purchasing and blanket orders, which is here. Okay, you can base also let me try to clear this menu. You can base a purchase order on a sales order, customer sales order. So we have the connection between the two. Okay. And there are some other options, of course. Warehouse, it's not mandatory, but if you want from here to determine in which warehouse you're going to receive it, that will help later on in case that you have multiple warehouses, that will help the warehouse employees. You can mark it here, shipment modes and other types of order, and you can learn more about those categories later on. Those are not mandatory items. At the authorization and follow-up, we're going to discuss that for sure in just a second. Payment info, the system will bring over the payment terms from the setup of this vendor, which we saw before, but you can change it for a specific order, of course. If we look down, order items will be the main form to use, and then you can click here to open and choose a part number. Now you can see here that there is a limited list. That's exactly the vendor parts that we discussed before. So if I'm opening the list, I see only 20 items, etc. That's why, the reason for that is that someone in this demo system decided not to show all the part catalog. So I can choose from here and go on with the items, quantity, price that will come usually automatically based on the setup behind the scenes will show that, and some other items that you might work with like budget and profit center, etc. It's not a mandatory. Most important thing might be the due date, of course. When do you want to receive it? So you can have different due dates to different lines. If you got some discounts from the vendor, you can mark it as a discount over here, unless you want to change the unit price. And that's about that line. And you can see here the price source. In this case, it came from a vendor price list. I will show the vendor price list area and how to create those. If you want to open the full list over here, you want to go Control and then click F6. So you see, usually when you open here, it's an F6. But if you go Control F6 on your keyboard, that's one of the shortcuts, and then you'll be exposed to the full catalog that we have in the system and choose whatever. You might get a notification that this vendor does not supply this part if you're working with those limited part items, etc. But that's just a warning, of course. The quantity, price either come automatically or you fill it in and so on, and maybe different due dates that you want to receive it, and so on and so forth. You got the remarks area, so you can set some remarks. You got remarks per item. If you want to add some remarks specifically per item, look down underneath an item and you'll see order item remarks. So this is remarks per item, right? And the remarks over here is a general remarks. And those can be set automatically as well. So you can have the same remarks all the time. And I think if I remember correctly, it's under the purchasing area, purchase orders. Let's see if I remembered correctly. Otherwise, we'll look at it later. There is an area for setting text for remarks. So those are the remarks. Shipping address, if you want to do something over here, you can. Attachments, of course, there will be some of the sub-levels, etc. Basically, if you're not working with authorization mechanism, you can change the status here to authorized. That's the one that you want to use. This is a demo system, so you see a lot of statuses, but don't worry. Look for the authorized. That's the one you want to use. And then on the top right, print it out, email the purchase order, display it, and whatever you want to do with that. And you'll see here that we just created together right now a purchase order that can be sent. Since it is still on draft, you see that the system marks unauthorized. That's very important. It happens at the sales order. Here are the remarks per item, and here are the general remarks area. So you can set different remarks and so on. And of course, go back to the other webinars when we showed how to design those forms. You can design and determine which column not to show, with pricing, with totals, without totals, the way that you want it to look like. You can design it easily. Let's talk about the authorization here. If your organization working with authorization, you have several options for that. Option number one will be, and again, refer back to one of my webinars, to the BPM tool. The BPM tool is the workflow tool that is behind those statuses. And you can, over there, build your own workflow. So you can determine that the purchase order starts as a draft, then it goes to some kind of approval by someone, and then it goes to financial approval, and only then it is authorized, etc. You can add statuses, add paths. And I explained all of that part, and there are some other videos in my YouTube channel to look at how to build those BPMs. Then you can also, as just a reminder, add to each status rules like automatic emails, text messages that will be sent as soon as a purchase order is either approved, waiting for an internal approval, or whatever other notification you want to trigger by that system. So not only that you can determine who can move from one status to another, but also what will happen in each status, including if someone is waiting more than 24 hours to get an approval for a purchase order. This BPM tool can help you determine, help you force those items, and help you to set up your processes. So that's option number one. And the BPM tool is available in any process in priority, so you can determine workflow in other processes as well. But in purchase orders, we also have a straightforward type of mechanism. It's called authorization list code. Over here, you can determine either automatically or manually an authorization list. So I want to take you behind the scenes here to show you that you can create here different lists. So you might have, high level purchasing. You got maybe inventory items or office supply item or services. So you can determine different list of authorization if you need. Otherwise, for each code and description that you will create here, if you go down, you'll be able to mark from which dollar amount, who is the authorizer and who is the alternate authorizer. So pay attention, you have to start with 0 here, right? Even if the 0 will be whoever, the buyer, etc. and then go on to other amounts. What will happen if you'll use the VAT, the mechanism works automatically. So the way to use it, as soon as you will assign over here the authorization list code, either automatically or manually, then instead of authorize this purchase order, what you want to do is use pending authorization. That's a status that is a default here with the system. Whenever you do that, automatically the mechanism will recognize who is the next signer, will send an email to the next signer. The next signer will have an email with, dear Dan or whoever it is, there is a purchase order waiting for your authorization, etc., with link that the signer can click and go to this exact form again. So if I am the signer, I will have an email notification, then I'll click the email, I will come here to the same purchase order that you created, and then I can observe and look at the different items. Say, all right, let's see what you want to buy, what's the quantity, what's the price, maybe read some remarks, etc. What I need to do as the next signer is go to the one of the sub-levels here that's called order authorization, and by my name to click and approve. As soon as I do that, I am actually the alternate here, right? I click here, I can leave the form, and the next signer will get a notification, all right, now it's your turn to sign, and so on and so forth. And later on, you see in this case, it's authorized because the system recognized that I am also the second signer and so on. So, or maybe it was less than $500. So it's already authorized. And you can send a notification back to the buyer, purchase order is authorized, or as soon as it's authorized, automatically send it to the vendor using, again, the BPM that you have behind the scenes. So I hope it's not too overwhelming. I just want you to remember that you can create your authorization either by using different statuses or use the authorization list code F1, read some help, go online, see all the instructions on how to create and how to use. So that was the authorization here. I did prepare a quick video for you. This is from my YouTube channel again, and there is a playlist I created over there for mobile apps. I think I did. Let's see. Here we go. And over there is a little video that I created back then. You can use the mobile app for authorization as well. So here is an example using the mobile app over here, either from Android or iOS, logging in with your credentials, and then you will see in this app purchase orders that are waiting for you to authorize. You can click there and then see all the purchase order, see some more details for each one of them, and then see the items and so on. And then if you look at the bottom here, reject, authorized, inquire, this is an app that is available for you, or you can build your own app to authorize purchase orders. So go back to the YouTube if you want to see some more, and you'll see the different options that we have on that part. Printing out, we discussed over here on the top right, and we have a purchase order that is sent out. One of the area that is very easy to control those purchase orders that are out there, etc. Look at the purchasing and the purchase order area, view open purchase order items. There are several forms here, but this is one that I really like because as a buyer, I want to see a lot of information. Maybe as a warehouse, I want to see what's coming in, etc. And you can set different queries here to pull everything or pull everything that is supposed to arrive today or however you want to work. So you can see here, right, something that we just created right now. So you got the order date and you got the due date. You might want to move it to the left side so you can drag and drop the order number, the vendor, the part number, the quantity, and the balance to receive. If you want to show the value of balance, you can do that as well, and maybe some other information, authorized or not authorized, who is the next signature, and so on. So this is like an area where you can monitor all the different items from different orders, received, non-received, authorized, non-authorized, etc. This is very helpful. Then you can take actions from here. You can also use under the executive reports all the available BI report, business intelligence, or dashboards for purchasing. So here is an example of one or two of them. This is a purchasing manager. So you can see purchase invoices and open purchase orders by graph or pie or some kind of a report. To the top right, same with purchase orders, open purchase requisition on the bottom, and you can design over here and maybe decide which one you don't need to use and so on. So you can design a little bit the dashboards that you're using. There is another dashboard for a vendor. So you can look at specific vendor and choose the vendor to the left, look at invoices, and look down, see tasks from CRM, orders, quotes, aging report, finance, different contacts for this vendor, and many more, and even attachments. Okay, so that's examples of some of the dashboards that you have available for you. So the next thing we can show, I owe you a piece of information about the vendor price list, purchasing vendor price list. Very simple, but you can read more about that over here. In order to create a vendor price list, which means that whenever I'm creating a purchase order, the system will take the price from the right place. You can create here, and I'm going to pull some price list for you. You can give it a code, give the price list a description, choose who is the vendor that you're going to create this price list for. And as soon as you do that, you can look at the effect date, of course, which means that you can create several vendor prices. Therefore, you can track historical figures and historical pricing with this vendor, because you can cancel here the vendor price list, but it still will be available for you to see historically. And as soon as you create a code and a description, choose the vendor, look down at the part prices, you can copy and paste from Excel, upload, or manually choose. And over here, the system will allow you to choose part number even several times, because if you want to create several tiers, if you buy one, the price will be 51. Buy 10 of those, it's 50 and 20 and so on. And even if you have special discount instead of a fixed number or some other things over here, check it out. And later on, if you have some changes and you changed it all of a sudden to a different number, you will see underneath that we track also the changes to an actual valid right now price list and so on. So look at that area to create price list, and the system will take the price from the right area. So if you buy that item from Electronic Brothers, the system will get the price that you set. So that's a little bit very on a nutshell on the price list that are available here. We got some little more time, so I'll show you maybe two or three more stages to purchasing in general when you want to receive into the inventory. So inventory, under inventory transactions, you got the purchase inventory transaction, and we call it good receiving voucher. The good receiving voucher that I might show also in the inventory control webinar. You can choose a date, choose the vendor that you are receiving items from. You can record here the vendor packing slip number, whatever it may be. Okay. And then when do you going to receive it? So either leave it as default or change the location where you're receiving those items. And of course, under reference, which order number. So the vendor might tell you, all right, I'm actually sending you right now your order number, number 003 or whatever it may be. So you can choose the order number, and the system should auto-populate the items you are about to receive. So over here, that's the item, the balance to receive is 10, and you can either receive it all or partially. Okay, if you're working with lot numbers, that's the place. If you want to put this status on hold, so it will go to some QA. So instead of goods, change it to hold, and you can learn about those processes in the QA. Expiration date, it's something that goes with the lot number, if relevant, of course, and maybe some other items that might be relevant to you. If you're working with serial numbers, look down, serial numbers in transaction, that's the area. And again, right click on any item in priority, any sub-level, you can read more on how to use those sections. So simply like that, quantity 5 is already in my warehouse. The last thing to do with a receiving of goods information, receiving of goods document, well, all you need to do is to finalize it, change the status to final, and you are done with receiving of goods, etc. Okay, that's about that part. I think that the system didn't like the date of lot number here. Okay, but the items are already in the inventory and so on. Well, all right, someone played around with different setups here, serial number and so on. That's the process of receiving goods, right? The next process might be based on receiving goods, creating an invoice. So the vendor is sending an invoice and you want to create an invoice based on your receiving of goods. That will be under the account payable, vendor invoices, and multi-GRV invoice. That's the reason we call it GRV is good receiving voucher. And you can base an invoice from the vendor based on one good receiving voucher or several of them. I'm going to pull some data and show you that all you need to do here is to choose the vendor, record the invoice number from the vendor, right? By the way, the default is debit, but you can also create a credit memo from a vendor, right? Reference either one GRV, which will be here, the document number, right? Or based on an order, and not, if in case that you're not tracking inventory, so you can base it on an order. And if you look down, the invoice item, either manually or based on this document, will be auto-populate. If you have more than one good receiving voucher, so first you go here, you choose them one after the other. So this is one, and then choose the second one, and the system will auto-populate all of that documents items into the invoice item over here, when you can see the different pricing and different quantities and so on. And you might want to add an item like shipping that you were charged for, or whatever it may be, or maybe last minute discounts that you got, so you can control that. But that's an invoice, that's a financial document that later on you can finalize, and that will create a journal entry in the system. So that's the process of invoicing based on order, based on good receiving voucher, etc. And you can see here under the reference to the right, a journal entry was created, debit and credit and so on. The last step, I'm not sure that we're going to go into details, is pay for that invoices. And of course, you should look at the accounts payable reports and aging reports to see exactly when do I need to pay for an invoice and what's open to pay. All the balances will be here. But as soon as you're making a decision to pay, you can either create payment by check or payment by bank transfer, or if you're working and create a lot of checks, so look at the prepare payment mechanism and learn how to use the prepare payment that can create 100 or 1,000 checks in one process, where you can create them and then prepare the payments, finalize them, and print them, send automatic emails or whatever it may be, or even create an ACH file if that's how you work. One items that I wrote to myself to just discuss on a high level, but you should know that it exists. If you're working with a high level on purchasing, like an MRP, those exist here and you can read about them more. The MRP stands for Material Requirement Planning, and we have for distributors or for manufacturing. So which means that mechanism can look at actual sales orders and their due dates and so on, and can see safety stock, lead times, forecast, etc., and recommend for you under the purchasing demand automatically, recommend for the buyer what's the quantity I need to buy, or when do I need to buy it, and so on. That MRP mechanism is looking at the different parts in the system. There is a section under the part catalog. If I will pull an item, I'll be able to show you quickly. If you go to the part catalog, click on the part number and look to the right at the actions at the purchase and MRP parameters, click there, you will see all the parameters that the MRP is looking at. For example, safety stock. And there are some reports about it. Show me, what are the exemptions right now. Minimum for order from the vendor, maximum for order, the increments with the vendor, or the lead times, etc. All of that is under the purchase and MRP parameters for part, and that's what the MRP will look at when you're using that advanced mechanism. And again, some of the items here on a high level, but I want you to be aware of all the different processes that we have here, and you can shoot us an email or look at the priority export. For some more information, support.prioritydesksoftware.com.